So we were talking about non-random sampling methods on Friday, and I left here with judgment sampling. You decide what should be a typical or ideal member, but that's usually based on an expert selection. So you need somebody whose judgment you trust. Then convenient sampling, who's nearby, who can you ask? This is a frequent method of getting information, is a convenient sample. I don't know that it always should be. We should try as often as we can to do sampling with some sense of either system or rationale. And a convenience sample just says, all right, who's around that I can ask? 4 out of 5 dentists recommend chewing gum to break down gum disease. We couldn't find Bob. He was out of the office. That's not a good sample. Focus groups, which is what I did not mention last time. So if you select a panel to serve as a sample that you believe that panel adequately reflects the larger population. And again, this is in some sense another kind of judgment sample. Most focus groups are not chosen randomly, but that's usually more of an open-ended discussion rather than a single survey or a topical sort of demographic data. So a focus group allows you to get a larger discussion going on and a broader set of answers rather than a more focused, hard to say, a more tight, controlled questionnaire. Unfortunately, technology makes data collection trivial. Right now, you are shedding data by the kilobyte just by sitting here. If you've got your phone with you, it's got your location. If you've got your computer open, you're talking to the network. We know what you're looking at, where you're going, what sites you're investigating. All of that information is stored. Even if you're in incognito mode, it's just not stored locally at that point. But let's say you have a Giant Eagle Advantage card. You go to the grocery store, I know what you're buying. There's an anecdote, I don't know how true this is, but the story goes that a gentleman went to the store and bought milk and bread and stuff, was going to go home, and automatically Giant Eagle spits out coupons for things it thinks you might be looking at next. It spat out diapers. His daughter, who was on the same family account card, had come in and bought a pregnancy test. He didn't know. You're shedding data all the time. You bought something off of Amazon? Where do you think we get? Other people have also purchased, like a shopping history all over the place. YouTube tracks not only how often you watch the video, it tracks how long you stay on the video. It tracks whether you're watching it at normal speed or accelerated. It tracks how long before you click away, not just from the video, but from the ads within the video. How quickly do you hit skip? How quickly do you try and say this is an irrelevant ad, if you do it at all? Do you let the ad go by? Do you buy the version without the ads? All of your search history and frequency is now available, and that means that if I want to try and collect data, I can do it in ways you don't even know you've already given me permission for. How many of you read the end user license agreement? Click here to accept that you will use our software on the last app you want. It's 40 pages in some cases. No, we tell you, click, off I go. And then collect whatever they want, as long as they said they told you about it and you said, I read it. Questions? If I am trying to do a sample, I need to know how many people I want to talk to. I need to have some sort of measure of the parameter I'm trying to find for my population. And it now depends on the way I am trying to make this measurement. We'll talk about this more down the line in chapter 8, but we want to talk about how our measure can vary. What sort of errors can I get? What sort of difference between my sample and my population could happen randomly or could be because I chose a bad sample? So we need to figure out how many people we should talk to based on some of these variabilities. So let's start with some of the easy problems, things called biases. A bias is something that causes me to over or underestimate the parameter I'm looking for. And then there's true error. Unfortunately, we will get these terms in the public use swapped out around occasionally. People will talk about errors when they really mean to talk about bias, and they'll talk about biases when they really need to talk about error. So I want to distinguish between the two. A bias is something I can control. Error is uncontrollable. Non-response bias. Somebody tell me what you think that term means.
Being biased without knowing necessarily that you're being biased?
I would call that more unconscious bias, but this is actually not the surveyor's issue.
People that just don't respond.
You got an email, says, please complete this survey. We'll enter you for a $10 Amazon card, right? How many of you have actually clicked on one of those surveys? Why? Because you think it's a phishing attempt or a scam or something. But let's suppose it was from the Seton Hill bookstore and it was legit. Would you still do it? Oh, very few people actually did it. When we did this last year, I think we got about 10% of the students we emailed responded. That's a huge bias, right? If I know 90% of you are going to ignore an email because you think it's a phishing scam, then why am I doing this? I want you to imagine the person standing in the mall with a clipboard going, can I talk to you about the politics of the election? You're going to walk faster to get past this person, aren't you? If I only get people who are interested in the issue, they probably will have extreme positions. Every semester, you, as a student, will be asked to perform a faculty evaluation. So I will get evaluated. You will get to give your opinion of me and the way I taught this class and what you liked and what sucked and everything in between. I won't see them until a week after grades are due. I'm not allowed. They collect them. I don't see anything. I get a typed summary. I get comments. It's all typed. I don't get to do handwriting or anything. I won't know who writes what. Last semester, my highest response rate was 47%. Most of my students didn't give a damn enough to tell me what they thought of the class I just finished teaching. Now, mind you, these come out the last 2 weeks of the semester. So people are usually freaking out, dealing with their finals and going home for Thanksgiving and all of that. But can I actually make some good judgments if less than half of you tell me what you liked or didn't like about this class? Maybe. But most of the time what I get are people who think I absolutely walk on water and people who would rather see me die in a fire tomorrow. I get very little in the middle. This is also sometimes referred to as self-selection bias. People will come in to answer questionnaires or deal with surveys that they have an interest in the item. Notice neither of those can be forcibly controlled by the surveyor directly, but what I can do is I can increase my sample size so that even accounting for that non-response or self-selection, I get a sufficient number of responses. If I know I'm only going to get 1 in 10 people who respond to an email, then maybe instead of sending out 100, I need to send out 1,000. Would you call into the radio talk show? That's self-selection bias. If the guy on the news is talking about whatever, would you call that radio show to make a comment? If you're really interested in what that is, then maybe you would, maybe not. And maybe as your interests change, your opinion of whether you would do that or not changes. A different kind of error occurs when respondents lie to you. If all I'm doing is asking you your opinion about the election, your opinion about the kind of coffee they serve in the cafeteria, your opinion about how lunch was, you might tell me one thing, you might tell the head of dining services something different. You might tell the political science teacher something different about your opinion on the election to save face, to fit in with the crowd, to not answer something embarrassing, to protect your own privacy. People lie their asses off. If I send an email, I have no way of hooking you to a lie detector to tell. A response error, again, is something I can't control. That's why it's an error, not a bias. I can't control how you answer my question. I have to take your answer at face value. This shows up a lot in terms of peer pressure behavior, in terms of publicly distributed questionnaires. Raise your hand if. I'm raising my hand for nothing. No. Coverage error. We talked about systematic sampling. We talked about physical grouping, samples that are geographically located, the cluster sampling. Well, a coverage error means that I missed some important section of my population. I didn't cover all of those different strata or all of the different clusters that I should have looked at. One of the most important types of errors, in my opinion, is a measurement error, which is really a design error. I need to make sure the question I ask, actually the question you answers what I really want to know. If I want to ask people about illegal drug use, I really probably need to do that as anonymously as possible, right? Again, not here, but another institution I worked at, somebody wanted to ask students about marijuana use. Remember, that is still a federal crime in this state at the moment. If you live in Allegheny County, personal recreational use is a different story. The city of Pittsburgh has different laws than Westmoreland County does. But they distributed a paper survey with envelopes and wanted the students to use campus mail to return those to the faculty member's office. If I asked you to fill out a piece of paper and on it in writing, tell me whether or not you use marijuana, and then your fingerprints are all over that stupid piece of paper, would you feel trustworthy giving that to me? I'm not going to get an answer to the question I'm really asking, am I? Now, that actually combines several different kinds of errors. I'm pretty sure I'm getting a response error there. People are going to lie their butts off. I don't ever use any illegal drugs, thank you. I'm going to get a measurement error because I'm not going to get accurate information. I'm going to get non-response bias because people go, I'm not telling you. But in general, a measurement error means that the question I ask doesn't accurately reflect the information I want to know. So I need to make sure that I actually get answers that tell me the things I want to know. Again, it's an error, not a bias. There is also interviewer bias, but interviewer error means I ask the question of you, and the way I'm dressed or the person that I am causes you to change or influence your response in some fashion. If I ask you how much you're studying for this class, how many hours a week, I'll get a different answer than the end of the semester survey that's anonymous will. I'll get a different answer than if one of your other students asked you, well, how much are you studying for this class? By the virtue of being me asking the question, I change your answer. That's interviewer error. Interviewer bias is my asking the question changes the way the question is heard. Somebody else asks the question, they'll hear a different question. Quite often, this is one of tone. How often are you studying for this class? Is very different than how often are you studying for this class? And that's interviewer bias because I did something that I can control as opposed to error. There is always some measure of error in any sample process. Unless you do a complete census, you are guaranteed to have sampling error of some type. That's uncontrollable. It's not your fault. It's not bad design. There's going to be some error, and that's going to be our variability idea. We're going to have to figure out how to account for that, ideally, to make it as small as possible. If I take a questionnaire and I give it to the first 20 people that walk through the door, what kind of a sample is it? Some of this is what we did Friday, some of this is what we did today. So you got to go back and look at the last bits from Friday. First 20 people, convenience. The first 20 people walk through the door, I hand out 20 slips of paper, I'm done. If I go to a clothing store and I hand out questionnaires to everyone who looks under 12, judgment. And it's got to be biased because you're assuming I can tell somebody's age by looking at them. I am a horrible judge of age. So that's going to be a problem. On our Canvas page, in the handouts section, I believe, there are two data files. One contains a list of the tables that are in the appendix of the book. The other contains every data file in every chapter. I think it's actually labeled chapter data files. So when this says, I want to look at the data in the file that says late show, you can actually get this data file. And thus you could go in to random sampling with a random number table. Simple random sampling with Excel, it even tells me to use rand between. Well, there are 48 numbers here, so I could say rand between 1 and 48, and I could do that 10 times. But that means you don't have to do this by hand, because this data file is available for you to download, as is every data file we're going to use the entire semester long. Even the ones that are in the chapters of the book we're not going to cover. You can have them all. But if this said do a systematic sample and you want 10 people, what would you do? There are lots of different ways to do this. Somebody tell me one of them. 6 rows of 8 people. There are 48 people there, and I want 10.
Every fourth number.
If I took every fourth number, so 12, 1, 2, 3, 16, right? I get all of these and all of these, but I wouldn't get anybody out of the last row, would I? Because by the time I'd gotten 10 people, I've only gotten through 40 numbers. Okay, that's perfectly fine. That's certainly a systematic way of doing it. You got another?
Take the first 10.
Sure, I can take the first 10. It's systematic, but again, the first 10. Judgment sampling. So now, here's a problem for you. Judgment, you have to use your best judgment to decide which 10 numbers up here are most appropriate representatives. I'd be better off throwing darts, right? I could probably make up some kind of criteria, but I have no idea what I'm doing at this point about moviegoers' ages. I don't even know what movie this is. I'm pretty sure it's not a slasher film if we've got a couple of 11-year-olds and a 10-year-old here, but it might be Inside Out too. I have no idea. What are we going to see? Convenience sampling. All people in the, I want 10 of them. I'm going to take the first row and then enough of the second row to finish it out, right? Any way you want to set this up. But the statement here that matters is explain your methods. So when you decide what your systematic sample is, when you do this in random sampling using Excel, you would need to then say, here's the command I typed, here are the 10 numbers I got, so the 10, 1 through 48, so these are the 10 data values I got. That absolutely works. But in general, it's not, here's my data. It's here's my data, and here's how I came by it. Without that explanation, just having a pile of data is almost always insufficient. Questions? How do we get that information? It doesn't tell me in the problem how I got that information. But in general, where do I come by my data? How do I get it? Well, again, there are thousands of vetted sources, some of which are at the table top of page 43, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the Economic Report, from the president's office. I go to several different magazines and newspapers, databases worldwide. I can search the web, but then that's going to depend on some search optimization behavior, and where do I get my information and who do I trust becomes another question. Information literacy requires me to be able to judge the source of my data. So in some sense, when I say, where'd you get the information? I want to know if you have taken a critical look at who provided you the information. Something I hear rather frequently is that no one knows how to research things. And I mean, do your research, not I looked it up online and went with the first 3 results. That's a very different statement. And it's one of the things you have to train yourself to do, is to ask the question, where is this coming from? And do I trust who gave it to me? There was a huge debate a number of years ago, because Laura Bush was a librarian. And the internet was supposed to put information at everybody's disposal, and everybody would have access to all the information they would need, and all of these arguments could be settled by looking stuff up properly. Great idea. Clearly worked so well. We settled all these giant arguments because everybody has all the information. Somewhere, someone decided to put a person in charge of a pile of books, a pile of references, and said, these are things we should trust. And then that person, the librarian, is responsible for maintaining the quality and reliability of that pile of information. A web search is literally going to return me results that I don't know how they got them. Anybody know how Google PageRank works? PageRank. Sometimes you can buy your way up the PageRank, but most of the time it's a matter of how many other people have looked at your site, found it reliable, and then used that link. So it's links in and links out. So there's this search engine optimization idea, and Google PageRank crawls the web and looks at how many times people are looking at different places. But that's only part of it, because you can pay for your rating to be higher. You can pay for things to be put in different places. Sponsored ads, all those things appear in the midst of my Google search return. And now, at the top of my Google search return is what? Open the internet, go to Google, and search for something you're interested in. I don't care. Search for baseball. Search for the Steelers. I don't care. The very first thing at the top is what? Okay, but if you're on the homepage for Google, usually what comes up at the top is an AI summary of all the rest of the information underneath it. They don't even give you the link at the top anymore. They give you a summary. Somebody's gatekeeping you from that information. In this case, it happens to be whatever Google's AI is named this week. Gemini? I don't remember anymore. But there's a problem here. It used to be the physical library was gatekeeping. I'm sorry, the library's closed, you have to leave. But now, the internet was supposed to democratize that. Everybody could get at it whenever. Now there's another layer between you and that. So again, some of the issues are making sure you get information from good sources and that you can vet those sources yourself, as well as finding out, does other people believe these things too? But let's suppose I am going to have to do this information gathering on my own. I want a survey. So in one sense, you can ask any question you want. If you're going to do a survey, how can you figure out how to get good information? Well, survey design in and of itself could be a whole course. But I'm going to give you what I consider to be the bare bones idea. And the first of that is, what is it you really want to know? What's the goal of your research? What questions are you trying to answer? What information are you trying to get at? Then, what's your budget? Now, really, that's more than just money. Who's doing the information gathering? How long do they do this information gathering for? Yes, how much can we afford to pay them? If I'm going to pay for somebody to go knock on doors, I got to pay at least minimum wage or I'm in trouble, right? Much less gas money, weather, all the rest of that. But I need not only to budget money, I need to budget time and staffing. I need to take into account what resources need to be allocated to this problem. Then I need to actually design. So what's my target population? The frame, the list of the units in the population. Who is this? How big is my sample size? I need to figure all of that out as part of the research design. Now, that also includes things like, what type of survey is it? Do you want to ask a Likert scale? 1 through 5? Do you want to use even numbers or odd numbers? Do you want to ask open-ended questions? Do you want people to use sliders, etc.? How are you going to administer this? You're going to send out paper copies? You're going to send out a link to click so that everybody can click on the link and just answer all this information into a website? No, that's a phishing attempt. Don't do that. How are you going to create this survey that you're going to give out? I did a survey of the volleyball team a couple years ago. Riley Rock, one of my students, designed a survey on mental health and athletics, and she built a web app. And every day, the students would get on and click from 1 to 5. This is how I'm doing today. This is my stress level, and these are the things I think are causing me stress. They were done in less than 30 seconds. They did it when they went to practice, when they went to team events. That survey data is being used to write a paper that is supposedly going to be published in October. Good Lord willing. So now that I know what kind of survey I want to give, I can actually sit down and write the questions to make sure I get the data and the information I want. But then I should test that out. And if it's not giving me the information I want, so I really kind of do a pre-sampling. So I do a pre-test. And I revise my questions if I need to. So it may very well be that I didn't design one of the questions well enough to get an answer, get information I really want. I need to go back and look at that a little in a different way. Let me revise this, and then I'll be able to send that survey out and do a full administration. Sometimes surveys contain follow-up questions. People can opt in or opt out of follow-ups. Yes, I want you to contact me if you have further questions about my answers. Once I have all my data, I can code it. Then I can start doing analysis. "99% of people think of statistics as this last step only. And in one sense, that is the data analysis side of our statistics. But most of the work here has nothing to do with that. It has to do with getting and gathering and creating and collating and putting the data together before I can start doing the analysis. And in a very real sense, that's harder. Because almost all of the analysis part is done on the computer. I can have this lovely little box of mine churn through the information and look and generate more numbers than you care to shake a stick at. But I've got to get it all first. I've got to make sure that I'm actually answering the questions I've got. If I do a physical mail survey, then my frame is the addresses in the phone book or wherever I get them from. I end up with low response rates. I end up with some sort of response bias. If I do an email survey, again, I need a list of email addresses. How many people are going to click my link? Low response rates again. Web surveys can be done targeted in some senses, but public web surveys can be a problem, right? If I put a public link on my page and say anybody who wants to can respond to my survey. Do any of you know about the boat that we're naming the research vessel in England? They held a competition, a public competition. They said, you get to put your choice of name for the boat, and then people will vote on it. And the top 10 will go to the committee. Do you know what the number one choice for the research vessel in England was? Boaty McBoatface. Google that. You'll have a fun time reading through that news story. This is fairly recent. It's only within the last 5 years. Public web surveys can be a problem. Phone surveys. If I call you, are you going to answer my number? Do you know my number? If you read the syllabus, you know what my phone number is. But what happens when a phone number you don't know shows up on your phone? So again, the type of survey, when I think about the budget, I have to think about the cost per valid response. Not just per response, not just per survey, but how many people are going to complete the whole thing? How many people are actually going to see it? How many people are going to take the time to give me measured responses? There are dozens of resources on survey design. The American Statistical Association, the Pew Research Center, RAND Incorporated, they have huge numbers of resources on how to design surveys. Open-ended questions, fill-in-the-blank questions, checkboxes, ranked choices, numerical scales. All of these go into your setup. How do you think this question should be asked? Quite frequently, I'm going to ask the same question more than one way. Within the survey, you will see the same question come up multiple times. That's not just because I want to make sure I get the same answer each time. I'm asking the question slightly differently. If I told you I wanted to cut state taxes, would you be in favor of that or against it? You don't have to answer me out loud. Have an answer in your head. If I told you that my goal to cut state taxes was to reduce the number of police force in the state of Pennsylvania, would you be for it or against it? Context matters, doesn't it? If I wrote at the top of my survey, all cops are bastards, and then asked you that question, wouldn't that change it another way? So I can ask push-pull questions. If I ask it this way, I'll push your responses in one direction or pull them in a different direction. And quite frequently, I have to make sure that those two methods lead to the same sort of desired outcome, or I'm going to get conflicting data out of my questions. Which ones will be the real responses? If I ask a survey question that's a ranked choice, I have to make sure I cover all the choices. I have to make sure I have enough options. Those options don't overlap. One of the history textbooks that I was using in a different class said to me, we want to look at mortality rates, and we're going to do it by decade. So they said 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2020. What's the problem there? I'm looking at the mortality rates in 2 decades. What's the problem? 2010 goes in both piles. Oops. I have to make sure if I'm counting things, I only count them once. I have to make sure my choices don't overlap. As crazy as it sounds, most of the time, we're going to deal with the output of all of this data. As business people, you are not often ones required to generate the surveys. You get the answers. And you're asked, what does this tell us? Whether that's cost of price earnings ratios, and we're going to do a forecast for next year's stock returns. Should we do a buyback this year? Should we put it off another month? How should I amortize this cost best? All of those come from the results. They're down here in this last step. But you have to make sure that you can understand whether or not steps 1 through 7 were done even kind of correctly. Because in a very real sense, having bad data isn't your fault, but it can be your problem. If you don't know whether this is good data or bad data, then you can't make any judgments about how reliable your information is. Questions? 99% of this chapter, vocabulary and process, which means that the homework due on Monday is answering questions that are primarily about, do you understand what these terms are? Do you understand the way in which we're going to do these things? On our Canvas page, you will have from each section in chapter 2 some problems I've already done. And then you've got that list of the ones I want you to turn in on Monday. So that means between now and then, you've got plenty of opportunity to ask me questions, to meet with the tutors in the Enrichment Center. If you looked on Canvas, there was an announcement about Penji. All of our tutors are available directly through that app. The link that is available on our Canvas page is a little QR code in the announcement. You can put that right on your phone, and you can find out when people are available, when they have drop-in hours. You just walk in and ask questions. When they are open for appointments, you can make appointments at your convenience. As well as my office hours are on there, and you can come by and see me in the Enrichment Center whenever you want. On Friday, I'm going to start doing visuals, because the one thing that I know pisses people off more than anything else is a giant wall of numbers. Here, look at my data. That doesn't help. How do I get the information to you in a way that makes sense? What are my options? That means we're going to do a lot of looking at pictures over the next couple days. So that's where we'll start on Friday. If you came in late and I did not ask you for your name based on where you're sitting, please stay in your seat for the moment so I can finish the chart, because that way I don't have to hand out a sign-in sheet every day. I will see you all on Friday. Have a wonderful day. Question?
Do you want us to write out the question?
You don't have to write out the question. I just need the answers.
Answer?
Yeah, that's all. All right?
And then like if it doesn't ask for an explanation, it's the answer.
Just put the answer. Some of it can be real short.
Right, yeah.